Welcome to today's Brady Renner CPA's webinar, Supporting Your Employees, Strengthening Your Business. We're going to give just a few more minutes for other people to join us, and then we'll begin the program in just a moment. Thank you. Again, welcome. We'll begin the program in just about 1 minute. All right. I'm sure we'll have a couple other people join us as we get started here, but we'll go ahead and begin today's program. So first of all, welcome to Supporting Your Employees, Strengthening Your Business, Smart Strategies for Moving Forward. This is part of the ongoing series of Brady Renner CPA's webinar programs. And we've got a really exciting panel to explore some of the questions and strategies and challenges that people are experiencing as we all try to figure out how to move forward in this most unusual year. So my name's Doug Wendt. I'll be serving as moderator, and I'll take a few moments and introduce our panelists. So again, welcome to the program. Before I begin the introductions, just a couple quick notes. Number one, we will be accepting questions from the audience later in the program. To ask a question, simply click on the bottom of your Zoom screen interface, select Q&A, and you should be able to ask a question. We'll then queue up those questions and review them and answer them later in the program at the appropriate time. The second thing I'll mention is that this program is being recorded, and all participants and registrants will receive a copy of that recording digitally in a cloud-based download link in approximately 24 hours. So look for that tomorrow. So again, thank you for joining us, and we'll get started with today's program. So we have three really exciting panelists who each bring a different perspective to the table. First, I want to introduce Matt Brady. Many of you know Matt. Matt is the president and CEO of Brady Renner CPAs and Business Consultants. He has an extensive background in serving clients, both as a public accountant and as a corporate controller and CFO. He worked at a leading regional public accounting firm, providing audit and attestation services, as well as business and individual tax services before co-founding and leading Brady Renner CPAs. So welcome, Matt.
Thank you, Doug.
Absolutely, thank you. Second of all, I want to introduce Mike Kelly Jr. So Mike is part of the powerhouse team of leadership. He's vice president at Kelly Benefits, Kelly Financial Advisors, and Kelly Risk Management, a triumvirate of companies serving clients throughout the greater Maryland, DC, Baltimore region. After graduating from the School of Business at USC with dual degrees, because Mike decided that one track of learning wasn't enough, he's an expert in both finance and risk management and insurance. And he now helps run and oversee the operations of the Kelly companies based in Annapolis. In addition, he is a certified financial planner and completed his Series 7 examination in the great state of Florida before moving back to the Annapolis region. So thank you for joining us, Mike. And our third panelist today, Heinan Landa. Heinan is the CEO and founder of Optimal Networks, which is in Rockville. So everybody here on the team has Maryland roots, which is great. Optimal is a Maryland-based or Rockville-based IT company that works with CEOs to provide an array of services, some of which we'll be discussing today since they're very relevant to this environment, including outsourcing, backup, disaster recovery, strategic consulting, and enterprise class cloud computing services. He is also the author of the book, and I have my digital copy, and I'm waiting on my print copy, the book, The Modern Law Firm, How to Thrive in an Era of Rapid Technological Change. So welcome to the program, Heinan. All right, well, let's begin the conversation. So panelists, you can unmute and we'll actually let you talk with one another. Let's get started. So the topic of this session, again, supporting your employees, strengthening your business, smart strategies for moving forward. So let's put that in some context. We started the year thinking this was going to be the 2020 we all envisioned. It clearly did not work out that way. We are now at the halfway mark, hopefully on the better end of this COVID calamity, although the jury's still out on that. So we've walked through the crisis, or at least the first round of that, the fire. You know, everybody has scrambled for their PPP loans, their EIDLs. We've all become best friends with the banker we wish we'd become best friends with years ago. And we've all read literally probably hundreds of alerts, updates, and communications to keep us informed on how to survive. We've gotten through at least most of that. So if we're going to talk about the next step, going past survival into the words that are really key to this session, supporting, strengthening, what does that look like? And I ask this both as advisors and as small business owners. We'll start with Matt. What are some of the things that you're thinking about, Matt, as a small business owner, in terms of making your team feel comfortable, in terms of making your clients feel comfortable, that we can make the rest of this year function effectively and keep moving forward?
Well, thank you, Doug, and I certainly thank you for being willing to moderate this. And Heinan and Mike, I'm excited about sharing this opportunity with you. So, you know, one of the main things that that I've been thinking about, especially in recent weeks or over the last month, I think there was a time period when this COVID situation was really in its infancy through what maybe we thought it was, you know, at the peak, kind of that late April to mid-May timeframe, and there was still this attitude of we got to hunker down and just survive this. And I think you know, now that we're into, you know, late July, I think we're starting to come around to the idea of this isn't going anywhere anytime soon, and in fact, there's going to be some I think some very long-standing, if not permanent, business and social change that comes about as a result of what's going on in 2020. So I think you know, the key, and one of the things that we can explore now is, you know, what are some of those, you know, really long-term changes that we're anticipating that we need to start, you know, pivoting our business for. You know, one of the things that immediately comes to mind is this whole concept of virtually working. You know, this idea of everyone quarantining until we're through this crisis and then everyone comes back to work, I no longer think is really what we're staring at, both due to you know, employees' concerns about safety, some of the benefits that we've seen that, hey, this kind of works pretty well, you know, to a who knows how long this is going to last. So there's a lot of you know, avenues to that. But I guess that might be one of the, you know, first good things to explore. And Heinan and Mike, I'm curious your take of just, you know, what you think both with your own businesses, and I can share with, you know, my business, of this whole idea of virtual employment and where we think this is really going and how it can look moving forward.
Mike, I know that you all are actually in the process of beginning construction for a new office that Obviously, you were planning on that initiative prior to the COVID crisis, but nonetheless, you've obviously invested and are investing significantly in a new physical office. You know, what are you envisioning it being basically the same in how you use it? Or are you envisioning how it's used differently? What are some of your thoughts on how the COVID environment, to go to Matt's point, may temporarily or permanently change what we think of as the workplace?
Yeah, certainly. So I think in our industry, we're a little bit different where, especially on the private wealth side, clients still really want to meet in person. And we've seen that over the last couple of months, even with, starting to introduce back in face-to-face meetings, whether it's, having to wear gloves or a mask. Obviously, checking people's temperatures at the door has been a big thing for us. But yeah, we've invested in a pretty big building. It's about 3 times the size of our current office right now. So we still believe in having a physical location. But I think, the cool thing now is internally with our team is, those Monday morning meetings where, employees go to the beach or they go up to their mountain house and have to get in early Monday morning, fight traffic. Well, now maybe we can just hold a virtual team meeting to start the day off and then let them kind of work their way into the office at some point. I think internally as our staff, we're going to see a lot more working from home and more virtual ways to meet. I mean, and Heinan can talk more about what's going on with different softwares that are out there to be able to use. I know we're starting to heavily invest in that as well. Something like Microsoft Teams or anything like Slack or something like that, maybe. But as far as for us, for our client base, I still think that there's going to be a big need for office space for us. And I've talked to a lot of my friends in commercial real estate who I thought, hey, commercial real estate must be freaking out right now. And they're actually saying the opposite. They're thinking a lot more people are going to move out to more suburb kind of style offices, and maybe not so much in the downtown DC or San Francisco's or New York's, where a lot of those bigger Fortune 500 companies are probably starting to realize, hey, we don't need all this office space. But I still think there is a need for it, and especially outside of Annapolis, we're committed to it, obviously. But I think overall, it's going to look a lot different.
You bring up a really interesting point on the commercial. You brought up a number of interesting points, but one that stuck with me is you got me thinking about what the trend has been in the commercial real estate and the office sector has been more people in smaller spaces in more urban environments. And so if we're going to maintain or rethink the office environment, definitely we need more space per person, and we need, CB Richard Ellis, CBRE, did a whole piece about the 6-foot office, and it looks beautiful until you realize that space used to hold 40 people, and now I think it's set up for about 8. So there's a dramatic change that's going to come about, and even if people do work from home, or to your point, you suggested more flexible work hours, so just reducing the physical load of people in the office at any one time, but still recognizing that the interaction on an in-person basis with the client remains a cornerstone issue. And of course, you're also in a regulated industry, which I'm sure also adds to another factor there. Heinan, what are some of your thoughts on not only technology, but also your own team? I mean, you have people who work, remotely, you have people who work in the field supporting clients. What's been your own experience, being both a technology implementer and also trying to manage and build a company that follows those best practices?
Yeah, so we have a lot going on this remote front. So let me tell you that part of my company has always been remote. Well, I say always, but maybe the past 7 years. Our help desk has been spread out over Pittsburgh and Colorado, and they have full-time employees, but we wanted to get kind of broaden our pool of talent and where we could get them, and so we hired out of state, and that was wonderful for us. And we learned quite a few lessons. Actually, we made a few mistakes, and we learned quite a few lessons on how to properly run a remote team. So that was really interesting. The rest of my team has been, we have some people in the office, and we have engineers that go on site to clients, and we are classified as an essential business. So we had been open. However, we took everyone who could and sent them home, right? Like we tried to be as virtual as humanly possible and minimize our on-site presence and definitely minimize our office presence. So So I think if I look out, you still have, I mean, I don't know that this situation will be permanent, right? Like we have a long runway here where we're going to be a lot at home. And then, maybe we'll have some reopening where some people will come back into the office. And so that whole 6-foot office deal really plays at that point, right?
Right.
But we're all hoping that at some point we get vaccines and it's out there in the population and we can maybe treat it a little bit more like, we found a way to minimize its impact on our daily lives. So,
sure.
Maybe we can actually go back to work, because I know a lot of us also we also just remodeled our office. And so
that seems to be a recurring theme this year. Yes.
Oh my God! And we worked on it we worked on it so hard, and it's open space, and it was so exciting, and we had a design, and I was so enjoying working from the office, and and the camaraderie that was developed there. So, to me, there's a couple of things going on. If you look at what's happening, first of all, people especially the first 3 months of this whole pandemic, they went home and they worked their asses off. Am I allowed to say that? I need to put up my explicit content warning. They really worked hard, and part of it was because they didn't have the commute, and part of it is they didn't have the distractions, and part of it was, oh my God, I have a job, I better keep it.
Right. No, I remember reading the initial research suggested in the first 90 days of this crisis, the average productivity of the American worker went up by about 30%. 28% was, I think, the official figure.
Yeah, I certainly felt like I was working 16-hour days.
Right.
I wasn't, don't get me wrong, but it felt like that.
Right.
And
Matt actually was.
Like the
we'll
COVID
come back to
season.
that in a second.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Longest tax season in modern history. It just wouldn't end.
Right. And then you got another one too, so it was cool.
Yeah.
And so, the question then becomes, as we sort of settle into this, the studies I've seen are showing that people are getting a little disengaged.
Right.
They're getting distracted, they're getting disengaged. So you sort of have a double-edged sword there, where on one hand, you see that working from home is possible, you see that you can be productive from home. So you have a lot of companies questioning, do I really need this real estate? Do I really need it in big urban centers? And then on the flip side, you've got the employees that seem to be disengaging a little bit, blurring the lines between home and work, and starting to and getting distracted, and they're not quite as connected to you. So how does that move forward? Because it looks like we're going to have more of the work from home. It does not look like that's going away.
So let me actually pause you there and pick up on one specific example that I think we all need to have on our radars if we don't already. And that is a school year coming up that, based upon your county, your state, the politics between your governor and the county commissioner, I mean, it's chaos. It's absolute chaos in terms of the upcoming school year. And, we spend all this time being told as business owners, it's not our business, right? Stay out of stuff that's not our business. We're not supposed to be worried about those things. We're not supposed to be asking about those things. Right. And now we're in the situation where, because of leadership failures, honestly, outside of the business community, it's falling on small business owners to literally try to figure out, how do I accommodate, manage, support? And every employee, depending on where they live, might be in a slightly different situation. Mike Kelly, what are some of the things that this has raised for you in terms of trying to provide employees with benefits and support and managing their sense of feeling connected, to go to the point that Heinan so eloquently made?
Yeah, certainly. Well, I don't know if you saw, but Anne Arundel County yesterday announced that all schools are going to be going virtual for the fall, the entire fall semester. So I haven't even really had a chance to wrap my head around that yet. And I'm thankful that none of the employees that work for Kelly have kids that are at schools, in elementary schools or high schools, because I don't know how you provide the flexibility at this time to if they're not going to school, are they going to be homeschooled? Are they going to be online? I mean, I think you have to start coming up with a game plan with employees that do have kids, and in the virtual aspect of it, and how do you get around that? I don't know. It's so new. We thought we've had 4 months to think about it, but it seems like every day something else comes out, and we're
Right.
hoping it's going to be good news. But unfortunately, I mean, I guess that could be good or bad news. I think for most parents, they probably were looking forward to their kids going back to school. Health standpoint,
I've seen it go in so many different directions.
yeah.
I have to jump in and say, we literally, before we got on this webinar, one of my employees posted that his wife's work, their COO, they're based in Fairfax, put out a notice that said, in no circumstance will they allow employees to work from home just because their schools are closed, because they're not going to pay anyone to be babysitters.
Wow.
Probably
So,
could have been worded a lot better.
I mean,
So this is a frontline reality, right?
Yeah, and I bring it because it's so not empathetic, right?
Mhm.
And it's not the way I would want to approach my employees and the whole discussion, but I can see the rift, right?
Right.
Because we're not getting guidance. So we as business leaders are being put in probably one of the most difficult situations we've ever been put in. We are being asked to lead in a time of incredible upheaval. It's not just the pandemic and the school system. You've also got the racism and the protests and the civil unrest. And how do you, and I've had multiple conversations with business owners on this, how do you navigate this? We weren't trained for this.
Right. Right. Matt, I'm going to pull you into this conversation because one of the pieces that this really brings up for me is the divide between what I'll call frontline businesses and businesses that are, I guess, for lack of a better term, second line, which is pretty much all of us, by which I mean we have the flexibility of operating in a hybrid or virtual environment for the most part. We have control over our own office environment for the most part. We don't have a retail or a restaurant or a medical space where not only do we face the challenge of functioning under the COVID environment, but second of all, we have the fact that unless we invest heavily in PPE and reconfiguration and new revenue streams, how are we going to get through this? What is your thought, or what has been your observation about clients or just other business owners that who are in that frontline scenario and how they're adapting to this environment, both for their own business and for their employees?
Yeah, well, it certainly, has been interesting, especially in the retail space, restaurants, personal services, this kind of stuff. Certainly the government support was an absolute godsend for all these businesses to get through this. But that money's starting to run out, and restaurants are still only allowed to be 50% capacity. Most personal services are still at rotating shifts and appointment only. I mean, nobody is at full capacity revenue yet, and so these are a lot of the conversations where we are having with clients that are on those front lines of all right, we got this shot in the arm that allowed everything to kind of stay together, but how are we going to pivot our model? And there are some clients getting very creative as far as really changing their revenue stream. I mean, I have a restaurant that was a just a regular brick and mortar restaurant, has really been able to pivot and has found opportunities to get into large scale catering, even has partnered with some nonprofit and government programs that are providing meals for people, and they've been able to get involved with that, and it be a source of revenue. So some people are getting creative, but I'm going to be as honest as I can. There are certain industries that without being let off the leash, so to speak, and allowed to open at more of a capacity, which, who knows with leadership, if and when that will happen. There's either going to need to be another round of support, or, we might be staring at a fairly devastating fourth quarter.
Mike, one of the other things that I think factors in here is generational distinctions. Different perceptions of stay the course versus pivot, get back to the original, normal, or try to adapt to the new normal. I'm curious your thoughts. You work in and lead a multi-generational family-owned company, and you work with people who are largely in very similar spaces. What are some of the challenges and some of the opportunities that come out of this?
Yeah, I probably am the perfect guy to answer this question. So my father, for people that don't know, is a 6-year-old CEO of our company. Awesome guy, built the company 20 years ago. It's been fantastic. We're still in the same office that we opened our doors in. I don't think we've put a single dollar into the office. So our air conditioning is working great right now. But no, to your point though, it started about 2 years ago. I can see people my generation, close to my generation, and where they're going and what they want. And I think this whole thing of being able to blend work and play together has become more of an important issue for the younger generation. So I've started on my father and our firm about 2 years ago, where finally he got a little bit of a wake up call with COVID and what went on. We shut down our doors for 2 months. We were fully virtual, and we didn't think that we could do it, but we quickly realized we could. I'm thankful that our team made us put together a contingency plan a couple years ago, so that if something was to happen, we were able to act on it. And I think a lot of other businesses realized that they could do that. And a lot of my clients, I think, were able to see what happened and go forward with that. But one thing I'm seeing, especially the companies that are kind of in position to, is this could be a great attracting to go get employees. You can go and say, hey, I know that this guy's going to pay you a little bit more. They might do this, but we have a great work from home policy. We're way more hybrid than a lot of other firms. And I think that this is a good way for other employers to go out and try to poach some higher level executives or salespeople, or, even the lower, some that might be entry level. It's a great way to go get employees that you might not have been, or they may have thought they were happy for the last 10, 15, 20 years. But all of a sudden their employer, like Heinan was saying earlier, I don't care what you're doing in the fall. If you don't show up to work, we can't have you. Well, you might be in the same industry, and they might say, hey, we embrace that. We love you that you have kids. Stay home with them. Make sure that they're being taken care of. And we'll support that. And that's going to be a great way to attract talent over the next couple of years if your company's in position to do it.
You brought up a really good point, which is how we can leverage this opportunity competitively as small companies, because a lot of small businesses have historically struggled, particularly in the DC region, where you've always got the federal government and the contracting community and large chains and just well-funded enterprises really siphoning off talent at all levels. So, and I'm also still thinking about what Matt said, because I think Matt's absolutely correct. We don't yet know what the fourth quarter is going to look like, whether it's going to be recovery or whether it's going to be another serious shock to the economic system. And I'd like to think that technology can help us with both of these questions. So I'm going to put Heinan back on the spot, but distinctively, I'm going to ask you to briefly address each of these points separately. So first of all, if I am running a retail restaurant, service business, any kind of a business where physical presence is important, how can technology help me make employees feel more comfortable, manage COVID risk, engage with customers who are used to only doing business when they pass by, and now they're not passing by anymore? What are some thoughts that you have on helping businesses that are at risk to pivot even more effectively using technology?
So, my biggest experience with that is in the gym world, in the fitness world, because yes. I actually belong to several gyms, and also am a teacher of a gym, of a dance program. Mm-hmm. And it's really interesting to see how these gyms have embraced this. And it's the physical presence is very, very important. You want people to go to the gym. You want them to work out on the machines. That's why they pay you the money. But there's also a whole group exercise program where you have instructors leading classes, and that is motivating to a whole nother subset of the population, right? The gyms that jumped on the technology bandwagon quickly are doing better. The ones who quickly realized that they would have to pretty much keep their facility closed or very limited for a long period of time and said, how are we going to serve our customers? And started offering virtual classes on Facebook Live or on Zoom or however they decided to do it. They're the ones keeping, not only keeping their customers connected to them, but they're also the ones that are now coming up with very clever ideas like virtual gym memberships. So wait, we just expanded our reach from this small little geographic area of people who live near the gym. And we are putting on such incredible virtual classes that people who used to know our instructors from I don't know when are now tuning in over the internet from all over the world. Well, we can now offer a virtual membership for $25 a month where they can access all of our virtual classes. So that's just one approach. You know, you look at restaurants and things, and the ones that jumped on the bandwagon and figured out how to do the remote delivery, you know, the remote order, the online ordering with the remote delivery, and they started putting together very creatively. They started putting together family packs because they know that families are home trying to have dinner together in their own bubbles. So that's, I guess that's my real number one thought is you got to look at the technology. Even if you're a personal services industry, you got to see what do your market need and give it to them that way.
And I'm going to pull a particular item out that I know we were talking about in the pre-session before the webinar, and that is CRM technology, customer relationship management. Matt, we've been working on it for a long time. That's been a cornerstone of our efforts together. Mike Kelly, you mentioned it as a critical tool in your example, and I'm going to open this up to the group with an initiating statement. So one thing that I think a lot of businesses forget is how much they need to stay on top of that customer relationship in order for it to flourish, unless there's the natural physical presence or the natural flow of the business relationship. Customers will come and they'll go, and you're relying on basically sort of like the tide for all intents and purposes to bring them in. Okay, now that situation has changed, and not only do I need to be in more intimate contact with them, but Mike Kelly, to your point, if my employees aren't in the office together, I don't have the benefit of saying, hey, Frank, did you talk to Joe at such and such company last week? Now, all of a sudden, I only have the digital information in front of me to tell me what we're doing with our customers. I'll start with you, Mike. What are some of your thoughts, or what have been some of your experiences on using tools like CRM to help strengthen and maintain effective customer relationships?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the CRM is the brain of our organization. Without it, I don't know where we would be. Because, you know, we're in an industry where we don't work with one or two clients. We have thousands of clients that we work with and we talk to on a daily basis, weekly basis, monthly basis. So if we're not in the office, to your point, Doug, how do I know if one of our assistants had a conversation about a move money request, or they added a new employee on their health insurance? I'm not going to know that unless I was just in the office and I overheard the conversation or on a weekly meeting. So it's nice to be able to pull up a CRM, look at the notes, see if there's any notes in there, and then have a good general idea. So I'm not calling, asking the client again, hey, I know you just talked to Tracy in my office, but can you remind me what you guys talked about? And that doesn't look very professional, right? So it's nice to be able to go into the technology system, pull up the notes, pull up the address, pull up anything that you can kind of wrap your head around with, and also any of the document storage where we need to pull something up. It doesn't matter where we pull it up from. You know, if it's a physical location server where it's in the office, or even, heaven forbid, people aren't still using file cabinets, but I know that they do from here and there. We luckily, again, the generational divide, 3 years ago, decided to shred all of our paperwork and get through it. That took me 2 years to get that done, but we got it.
Was that your initiative?
I'm
just curious. Okay, we're not going to get into whose idea it was. Okay.
Anyone asking how that's possible, hire an intern. That would be my only recommendation. Hire an intern. But, you know, then even files that we've had back in 1999 when we opened our doors, anybody can pull those paper files. Now they're digital on the client. Don't have to go searching through them through a shared drive. You just go to the client's file in the CRM, and I can access it from my phone. I can access it from anywhere in the country, in the world, really, as long as I have internet. So, no, the CRM definitely the brain of our organization. I think it should be a major focus on every organization.
And you wouldn't be able to manage it effectively or as effectively in this environment without one.
Correct.
It sounds like.
Yep.
Now, Matt, we've been using CRM largely to drive client communications and updates and keep people informed. It's amazing to me. We've actually had clients who at the beginning of this, new clients of our firm, who said, we've never sent out a communication to all of our customers before. Like, we're not even sure how to do that because some of them are in this system and some of them we didn't add here. And, communicating with our customers has just not been a thing. What has your experience been during this literal 6 months of crisis in terms of customer? Do you feel like communicating with customers, proactively educating them, directing them to blog content, that's helped them feel engaged and supported by your company in a time like this?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the answer is absolutely. Heinan made a point earlier about the early productivity that a lot of the studies were showing. And I certainly, felt that when this kind of first happened, and we went into kind of a hybrid approach, because again, as a essential business, we still had some activity in the office. We had some employees that went remote, but we definitely took the approach of, hey, our business as a professional service firm goes as far as our clients' businesses go, and if they're struggling, we have no business model. So we took it really upon ourselves to say, we need to make sure we're providing as much value as we could possibly provide during these hard times. And the best way that we felt that we could provide value right now is to just be as engaged of educators as we could be, that we were going to stay on top of everything that was going on, and we were going to get that information into our clients' hands as regularly, as possible. And in my industry, unfortunately, is too often the case, and it's where I find that we have differentiated ourselves a little bit, is, we have such a compliance deadline-driven industry, that my industry does have a tendency to be a little more reactive. There are things that clients have to come to us for because a tax return is due or a financial statement is due to, to a bank or a bonding company or that kind of stuff. And, so there are a lot of, accounts that unfortunately probably aren't as proactive as they should be on communicating out. And I think we were certainly in that position a number of years ago until we implemented, the CRM system and put tools into place to make sure that we were proactively engaged in communicating with our clients. And having that in place allowed us to just take that to even a higher level during this level, where we normally were sending out communications, monthly and quarterly, depending on the situation. And now we were sending things out, multiple times a week as things were changing so rapidly.
And thank you, Matt. And that brings up a couple of thoughts that I wanted to explore even further, both of which I think tie to your experience. The first is, I remember during the early phases of the crisis, one of the things that Brady did was set up an automated scheduling tool so that clients could respond to a communication and book basically an emergency consultation to review some of the relief programs. And I know that worked very well. And that, along with other efforts, helped you really be Johnny on the spot for clients. One of the things that I've been thinking about is how much, I know in our business, we were able to ramp up a lot more support for clients, in part because we took time away from what it takes to do in-person meetings. So instead of spending, an hour drive to a client, 90 minutes with the client, and an hour drive back to the office and probably half an hour to reset from all of that, now we're just pounding it out from the beginning of the day to the end. And one of the things that's honestly worrisome is, how do we go back? If our businesses are all operating differently in this virtual environment, and I'm gonna open this up to the group, but also I want to explore collaboration tools as part of this, and that's something that I know, Heinan, you have some input on, particularly with another webinar that you're holding. But how do we kind of keep the best of the efficiency of this world that we're in now without losing things that I think we're all eager to have at least some of that back. What are your thoughts on that? And I'll open that to the group.
Well, I mean, I could start. I'm thinking that we really, you have to balance the personal connection with the efficiency, and we're going to have to play it by ear to some degree. I did a quick poll on LinkedIn to see how comfortable people were with having in-person lunches with outdoor dining, because I've gotten a few invitations. And, the responses were all across the spectrum. They were like, yeah, sure, go for it. Go and sit with a business colleague and have a lunch outdoors. And then there's my much more conservative response, which is I have some high-risk folks in my family, and I'm not getting anywhere near anybody.
Right.
So, and I think we're going to have to use that same level of thought and empathy when we come back into the real world as it is. So like this type of a conversation is so much more powerful than a phone call, right? A video call is so much more powerful than a phone call, but it still lacks some of that personal touch that you get when you sit in a room with someone and shake their hand and see their business and all that. So I suspect we'll be incorporating some of this into our lives, right? Some of these video calls, and hopefully keep up that efficiency. But I expect we'll have to bring in some of the old school meeting people stuff too.
Right. All right.
Yeah,
So let me zero it. No, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Matt.
I was just going to jump in. I agree with Heinan completely, where I think you're going to see much more of a hybrid approach, because I do think there is something missed with the lack of actual physical content. But depending on geography, you're right, that can be a much more inefficient way. So I envision it, at our firm, for example, so some of the clients that I meet with, monthly, historically, in our role as their outsourced CFO, I see eventually that becoming a hybrid, that maybe, we continue to do these Zoom meetings monthly, and then once a quarter we actually get together. So you have, you're gaining the efficiency of the Zoom meeting, and I'm envisioning a couple of my clients that are in the, DC, Northern Virginia area, where you end up spending a ton of windshield time, and maybe you gain the efficiency of the Zoom meetings, but still once a quarter, you get that, personal, touch, maybe in the, distant future, it feels like it's forever away now, but maybe, you tie in a lunch, with that quarterly meeting, and it's much more of a, a personal client relationship kind of move. So I kind of, can see that going on. And one other thing I just wanted to bring up, because Heinan and Mike have both kind of brought it up in different capacities, but one of the things that I think really needs to be embraced, and we haven't really talked about specifically, even though we've touched on it, is what the virtual world does allow us to do as far as expanding our footprint. Heinan mentioned the fitness center that with the online classes was able to reach a lot more people. But I think for a lot of our local small businesses, using that from the an employee talent standpoint. I was talking to a client recently that's in the marketing industry that was full brick and mortar, and was in a heavy growth mode up until and even through this COVID situation, but we really was having some challenge finding talent. And all of a sudden it occurred to him, like, what, my with this virtual stuff, my talent pool just went from a 15-mile radius to now 1,000-mile radius, because why can't someone be in Texas and still work with me? If why is working from home in Texas any different than working from home down the street from the office? So there's going to need to be a balance with that. So I think we could take advantage a lot of of the virtual nature to expand our footprint, but we still need to figure out a way to keep that that personal touch.
So Matt, you point out that really the whole idea of going beyond, expanding beyond traditional geographical boundaries applies to talent. And Heinan, you pointed out an example with the gym industry where it can apply on the customer acquisition side. Are there other examples that any of you have come to mind of businesses that have really taken that loss of the boundary limitation and just run with it on either of those sides of the equation? Like, it's just time to rethink our model completely or add something new, whether it's a new service offering, a new product line, or a new talent strategy, and really make that a centerpiece of how they pivoted this time.
Well, I can say from a standpoint of different companies, I've seen them start going after different controllers in different states. I mean, let's face it, great state of Maryland and where we're in DC and Virginia, it's not the least expensive place in the world, right? So if you can go hire somebody in a different state, you might be able to pay them a little bit less. And a little plug I'll put in there for myself. If you're going to do that, make sure your employee benefits program can support that, right? So if you have a health insurance plan, great. It might work awesome in the state of Maryland and DC, but all of a sudden you have somebody sitting in Wisconsin. Are they going to be able to still take advantage of the benefits that you just promised them they're going to have? So give myself a little plug right there. We can always help
you. Go right ahead, because that's a critical point.
But I think higher level executives now, people that you don't necessarily need in the office, CFOs, even COOs, if they're comfortable with a virtual meeting, you're not limited to just the Maryland region where they have to come in every day, where you could go hire someone in Texas or Florida or wherever it might be.
But of course, then you're committing to presumably a permanent change. Like, these are customers or these are employees that, with the exception of the annual fly out to DFW in the Texas case, you may never interact with this person or this customer in person. Yeah. That's a sea change.
Yeah.
Right?
It does make a huge difference. We've always, even with our remote employees, we've always brought them into the company at least once or twice a year to just connect physically. And so it's, we still haven't figured out what we're going to do to replace that, right? And I think one of the things that you have to do culturally is look at what you've been doing traditionally from a physical point of view and see what the gaps are in the digital world and figure out how to fill them.
Can you throw some examples on the table? Because that's an absolutely critical point.
Sure. So we have several years ago, we implemented Slack. And Slack, you can use it for quick messages back and forth between people, but you can also set up channels. You can set up channels to talk about your projects and channels to talk about your clients and however you want to do it. And it actually takes quite a bit of thought and work to get it done really well. But one of the things we have in our office is we have a kitchen. And we've always had a kitchen. And the kitchen is the place not just to eat, but it's a place to have our Friday morning breakfast. It's a place to bump into people, and it's just a real social place in our office. It has been for decades. So when we put together Slack, we're like, God, we need a place in Slack where people can just mess around, right? And we called it the Kitchen Channel, and that worked because what we did was we mirrored something that was in our physical culture, and we mirrored it in the digital culture. That worked out quite well. So the more things like that you can do, the better, right? Because they really connect.
I mean, one thing that comes to mind is how can we physically extend in the virtual environment? For example, I know one company that has been doing a lot of physical events. It's an event production company. Now they can't do events in the traditional sense. So they're trying to say, look, a virtual event doesn't just involve setting up a Zoom. It can involve an event in a kit, event in a box, or some people are calling it conference in a box. It can involve actually a lot of tangible items. I actually know one conference that, even though the conference is virtual, they sent everyone a conference attendee tag just to give people a sense. It's sort of like, you may not go on the physical trip, but we're going to send you a ticket.
Yeah, Doug, I actually was going to, you almost stole the words right out from my mouth. You said, has anyone else done a pivot and run with it? I know of two companies that have actually focused in on this idea that the associations, especially in the DC market, you have lots and lots of associations, that they cannot do their annual meetings, their annual galas, they have to do events. So one of them has actually put together a whole virtual summit platform, which is very interesting, and it's very detailed. It does a lot of what you were talking about. Manages attendees, manages exhibitors, all the stuff that you saw in a physical event, they brought it into the virtual world.
Yes.
And another company that I know that does a lot of digital work, Salesforce work, development work, actually put together a very detailed exhibitor booth in the virtual world that you could go and you could literally plug into different virtual events.
Yes.
It's just fascinating type of work that people are doing to take advantage of the new normal, if you will.
Really trying to go beyond sort of the plain vanilla step one and really do something that has at least the level of effort or commitment that you might experience in person, even though it's still not exactly the same physically. It still has a depth and tangibility to it.
Yeah, exactly.
So let me twist the question backwards to the other side. I know one client of ours, an engineering firm, a civil engineering firm. The president of the firm is a Gen Xer. He reports to a board of owners, basically a board of directors or general members of the corporation, who are all boomers. And they all want everyone back in the office as soon as possible. And honestly, I don't trust them to get anything done if they're not in the office. And I was thinking about the fact that, platforms like Upwork, a lot of freelancer platforms, have basically surveillance technology. So if someone's on the clock, it takes a screenshot to serve as an audit trail. There's a lot of debate about, well, what does it mean to make people work effectively in the virtual environment? What is our takeaway on this? Like, where are we heading? More surveillance, less surveillance? Is collaboration the same? If I don't participate in the water cooler or the kitchen Slack channel, is that a strike against me because I'm not supporting company culture? Like, I know that seems weird, but these are real questions people are asking. I'll open it up to the group. Like, what are some of the things you guys are thinking about or advising clients or just talking about with other business owners in terms of dealing with culture in this environment and making sure stuff's getting done?
Doug, let me jump in and actually, put a personal spin on something that we're dealing with internally, and frankly, not something that we've completely figured out a solution for. So I also say this almost to pick the brain of the panelists here. So, I'm a Gen Xer, but I'm probably a little bit more of an older soul in my work attitude. I've always worked for boomers prior to starting my own thing. My partner was a boomer. And so I've always been a very, personal in the office. I'm a manager by walking around. And as we have, been dealing with this COVID thing, as an essential business, we've kind of done a hybrid. I've had a few employees that have been working exclusively from home, and I've had a few employees that have continued to come into the office every day. And we have a workflow system that we help to manage our client engagements. And on the, regular ongoing monthly, quarterly work and how it's assigned out, that's all worked just fine. But I find what's happening, and this is my issue that I'm trying to deal with, is on these one-off kind of, whether it be a fire or a quick project. I got a client that calls, I need this done. My natural reaction is to walk over to somebody that's in the office and say, can you do this for me? And so what's happening unintentionally is my workload is starting to get lopsided towards the people that are in the office, because they're who I'm going to, and I find myself naturally interacting less with the people that are home. So I am trying to, solve that internally as far as how we're dealing with that new dynamic, and how do I put internal processes in place to make sure that, that I'm engaging in it. So I'm not even sure so much from our standpoint, it's about surveillance. I feel pretty good about my staff's productivity, but how am I reaching out and keeping them engaged when in some ways I feel like it would almost be easier if we were all remote and then I'm dealing with everyone. But because we're not all remote, there is a disconnection now that feels with the people that aren't in the office.
That's totally fantastic, Matt.
Wow,
Do
that's
you
a great
remember
question.
back in the was it the 80s when Tom Peters and Waterman put out In Search of Excellence, the book, and it was earth shattering. And one of the things they talked about a lot was management by walking around,
Mm-hmm.
right? And your job as manager, I don't know, I subscribe to this for forever. I do now, is you get up out of your seat and you walk around the office and you talk to people and you connect with them and you find out what you can help them with, like what barriers you can knock down, and you knock down those barriers. And it's called management by walking around. And so I think you actually have to, in this digital world, you actually have to come up with an equivalent, right? How do you walk around that digital environment? Do you have office hours where people can just jump in, right? When you have a meeting, do you leave it open a little bit longer so you can connect with the folks on the meeting? Do you schedule one-on-one calls with people on a more regular basis? Because what that'll do is it'll give you more visibility into the people online too, right? And it starts playing as the equalizer. But you have to, the one thing I have found about spreading culture and spreading connectivity out into the digital world is that you have to do it intentionally. It won't happen on its own. It can't happen on its own. The whole idea of people like bumping into each other in the office and spontaneous conversations, that's dead. It's dead in the digital world. You have to do something intentionally. You got to like sit with your leadership team and say, what are we going to do to make sure this works for us? Like me and my COO, and stop me, I know we're creeping up on two.
Yep, it's okay. I'm keeping an eye on the clock.
Okay. Me and my COO, like actually when we had people remotely, we finally realized it wasn't working for us because we weren't really connecting these folks to the culture. So we started a webcast every Friday evening, which we ended up calling Friday Night Live. And it was just a hootenanny. You know, we'd drink, I mean, he would drink and I would drink tea. And then we would, give kudos to people in the company, and we would tell company news, and we would have like contests, and it just became like a fun little show, and it really pulled people together. And we had quite a listenership every Friday night.
I'm just rolling with hootenanny. Like, that's awesome. That's awesome.
That was a hootenanny.
That we're going to put that at the top of the summary article where we, when we talk about the content of this awesome, spectacular discussion, and I think you bring up a point that I think is a perfect, because we are running close to the clock here, and I do want to bring us to a timely conclusion. But the fact of the matter is, Heinan, what you pointed out, and to go back to the questions that Matt and Mike have been discussing, we have to be intentional. We have to find a way. If we feel like we're missing something because of the fact that and I think, Matt, you're correct. I think a hybrid environment is the toughest, okay? And it almost begs the question, like one idea that came to my mind is practice at least one day a week, you managing remotely and putting your initial focus on the remote team and then making time for the in-person team that's in the office. Anything just to get yourself into the flow of recognizing your organization in all those different capacities and practicing using those virtual leadership muscles along with those physical ones. Really, really, really good question. We have covered so many important topics here. So let me conclude by thanking our panelists. I said at the beginning, we have an all-star panel, and we certainly do. So my thanks to each of you, Matt, Mike, and Heinan, for your time, for your insights, and honestly, for not only your insights as experts, but your insights as fellow business owners and entrepreneurs. It really reminds me we're all in this together. We're all in the trenches trying to make things happen. So for our participants, for those who are attending, please know that we will be providing a recording of this program tomorrow. And please feel free to reach out to any of these individual panelists with questions. This conversation can continue. These are experts who want to help you and help one another. So feel free to reach out. I will also make sure to mention, and we will include in the post-program email tomorrow, that Heinan's team is actually doing a workshop 2 days from now on the 23rd on some of the technologies to help with remote and hybrid working. So we'll include information on that as well. So gentlemen, again, thank you so much. And we really appreciate all the insights you've offered today. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All
Thanks,
right.
Phil.
And thank you all for attending today's program, and have a great rest of your day.